Hi, welcome to our tour of language. In this video, we will be discussing the impact language has on our society, both culturally and on a societal scale. Culture and language have an inseparable connection in which culture and language strongly influence each other. Language is not only one part of culture, but is also the lifeline of it, as we represent and defend everything in our culture through language and arguments. The way one speaks through accents, etiquette, and overall dialect is intrinsically due to how, where, and in what culturally significant environment they were raised in. But how do linguistics shape our initial culture and vice versa?
Well, for starters, take a look right here in America. Everyone understands the intrinsic divide in culture between Northern and Southern Americans. Northern and Southern cultures in America, although they use the same language, greet and depart differently from one another. For example, saying thank you and the idea of a Southern charm are unique Southern qualities not necessarily reflected in Northern speech. Even though they are both Americans, the ways they perceive and use language is influential on how differently their cultures are shaped. We can see each culture's demeanor shift and change as well. Two other examples to how we differentiate would be the use of words in certain situations. Someone in the Northern Hemisphere of America may refer to a flavored carbonated beverage as pop, where in the Southern Hemisphere, you'd hear it referred to as just a soda. Also, in the Southern Hemisphere, the use of the term y'all to be referred to as a group of people, and in the Northern Hemisphere, you guys would be used to refer to a group of people regardless of gender. There is no right or wrong way, but the differentiation attests to the fact that culture indeed does divide within our own country, which opens the door for biases to be formed.
And this isn't just related to locations or specific cultures, but to society and how people advance in it. How and what we speak depicts our place in society, according to ethnographic research. The U.S. bases linguistic difference as a basis for evaluating people as superior and inferior, which of course is a bit archaic, but it shows the weight of things like accents and etiquette, and how they shape others' perceptions of one's culture and personal character. These components of language have a long-standing history of influencing entire populations, as they can be just as manipulative as they can be assuring. These are common stereotypes which pervade others' opinions of you despite perhaps their best attempts not to judge you based on your voice. Think of a very Southern accent versus a Northern accent. Then add in the colloquial that comes with that Southern accent, and the very strict adherence to proper English that might come with the Northern accent. When paired side by side, without attention to the content for which the two are discussing, the Northern accent would almost immediately be assumed to be smarter. These stereotypes, true or not, help shape biases against others.
Is that not where the problem with language lies, though? People are so easily taken by the words of a person they may not even know, simply because of the way one talks. Not only this, but the fact that language is constantly being shortened or even forgotten due to the rise of popular, globally spoken languages. People are conforming more towards the generally accepted way of speaking said languages, such as Spanish, Mandarin, and English, instead of using the unique dialect associated with one's culture. Take, for instance, the Seri people. Due to the lack of representation of the Seri culture, the number of those who speak the language has significantly thinned, and have taken more of a disposition towards Spanish. These people are so willing to part with their own language to conform with what society deems as the popular languages. So, how much can we really say is connected between language and culture?
Well, instances like that is why we have people who specialize in teaching languages to others, usually in an attempt to not only keep lesser spoken languages alive, but to prevent the rise of monopoly on language. Oral history serves as a means to transfer both language and culture to future generations, and a culture's written component provides an unaltered record of a person's opinion at a specific point in time. By this line of reasoning, those who truly want to keep language alive, especially language of their own culture, which has been overtaken by this rise of more well-known languages, should be able to spread awareness of the decline in the practice of less widespread languages.
But who would even bother learning a language that they have no interest or initial connection to? People who don't tend to study language don't care to perfect it and preserve it. Our language is constantly evolving due to our melting pot culture. In many countries, people speak primarily one main language. For example, in Haiti, they speak French, and in Nigeria, their official language is English. There are many different languages in both of these countries, but they each have a popular language that is spoken by the majority. Trying to use languages other than the mainly spoken one in any given country is just inconveniencing to people who already know and prefer their primary language.
Not necessarily. Major countries interact with other countries all the time, especially in economics. For instance, California's Proposition 58 was a law passed that enforced the teaching of the Spanish language to younger classes of students. California Proposition 58's passing is believed to have been contributed to its stance on marketing our skills in linguistics over to other countries, potentially enhancing our trade and global presence in economics. And this is only one language, but may expand into many more, potentially further enhancing our ability to trade and converse on a more professional level with the delegates and economic affairs of other countries.
Sure, that could help in trade and whatnot, but that doesn't save anyone from having their culture and language swallowed up by, say, moving to other countries. Usually when people migrate to other countries, they take up the customs of that country. People go back to the country from which they originate to visit with a changed accent. Language can be learned and unlearned, making culture separable from language.
That isn't something set in stone, though, especially for languages that are used worldwide, like sign language. People who are deaf have what's called deaf culture. Different things are represented by hand signs and facial expressions through American Sign Language. According to Dr. Walter Nance, around 85% of deaf people in the U.S. marry other deaf people.
Exactly. People tend to stay in their respective cultures whenever there is a community available to continue practicing them. Even in countries where the language and culture have shifted dramatically, it is not as if people give up their culture or try to assimilate instantly to another one. Culture and language are both intricate parts of a person's life and are not interchangeable. Culture in its own way is so hard to even define because if you were to ask 1 million people for a definition, you could get 1 million different answers. This on its own attests to just how important culture is to human beings and their everyday routines. Language is our communication key. Whether it be French, English, or sign language, we need language to ultimately survive, and that's why it is also imperative in our everyday lives. These two super important factors are not usually correspondent.
The mixing of culture and language can produce several varying results. In a study that follows 6 Polish people living in Dublin who have migrated to Poland, it asks them questions regarding their view about language and how aspects of Irish English compare and contrast to that of their own language. The study also mentions culture and how accents are part of these individuals' lives. They present both positive views and negative views toward Irish English. This study shows how language or dialect of language is spoken and how this affects the people who migrate to other places. So while the results of integrating with the shifting dialects or being influenced by other dialects varies and has consistent negatives and positives, it shows that one's own language and dialect cannot simply be changed due to the influence of others.
There are languages with deep roots in culture, and there are languages that are shared by many cultures, but show differences through accents and dialect. Language is not simply a tool with which we express our ideals, it is the foundation behind our culture, how we share it, and how it can develop into a more complex form. Language is a part of how we perceive the world, just like culture, and it is an imperative part of what forms our views on all worldly manners. Just as much as it may separate people's views, it is also the foundation of what makes culture so diverse. And from that, we can find the similarities between each other's cultures. Thank you so much for listening to our tour on language, and we all hope that you gained more knowledge as to how language impacts everyone's culture. Thank you.